The UK sits at a dangerous tipping point, one that can tilt either way. With the bold reforms, the UK could reposition itself as a prosperous global leader, or it could continue to sink into permanent decline, plagued with instability and irrelevance on the world stage. But to comprehend the gravity of UK's decline, we need to look at the early warning signs of a third world economy. In the UK, we see rising poverty, failing infrastructure, a healthcare system on life support, and a generation facing a severe cost of living crisis. Now, you might think that UK's decline happened with one bad event or one bad policy, when actually it was multiple events happening at the same time, like a death by 1,000 cuts, which slowly chipped away the UK from the outside. And it all began in 2008. The global financial crisis shattered what was once the most powerful financial hubs on earth. The UK had to pump £141 billion to bail out banks like RBS and Lloyds just to stop the entire system from falling apart, but it came at a cost. Government debt exploded. As this chart shows, the debt to GDP ratio shot up from 40% in 2007 to over 80% by 2010. To cope with the aftermath, the government turned to austerity measures, where the government cut $100 billion in public spending over the next decade. It was framed as fiscal responsibility, but this meant hollowing out the very systems that people rely on, including hospitals, schools, council services, causing the public sectors to decay slowly year after year. But the worst part? It didn't even work. Real disposable income, which is the amount that people have left to spend, stayed the same for over 15 years, whereas the cost of living shot up drastically. Before 2008, the average household spent around £500 per week. Now, it's nearly £700. This is why so many young people are still living with their parents until their 30s, and house shares are becoming the new normal. Kiss goodbye to buying a home unless you're already making £80,000 per year, which is already the top 5% of earners. But why is this actually happening? Why is it so unrealistic to live independently, build wealth, and survive on a single income? Now, the answer lies in a series of non-random disasters, each one bringing the UK closer to economic irrelevance. Now, just as the UK was trying to recover from austerity, it was hit by two major global shocks, and it all started with Brexit. In 2020, the UK's departure from the EU was met with an economic disaster. The EU had been one of our largest trading partners, but after leaving, we lost frictionless trade. Red tape regulations surged. Exports to the EU had dropped by 21%, whilst imports dropped by 7%, creating a huge trade deficit of over £100 billion by the end of 2021. But these damages went deeper than trade. The uncertainty of Brexit shattered investor confidence, leading to a sharp decline in foreign direct investment by 25% between 2016 and 2021. But 400 financial firms moved $1.4 trillion worth of assets out of the UK and into Europe, which was a devastating blow to London's global financial dominance, causing the UK to become more and more isolated. But things were about to take a turn for the worse. Just as the UK was trying to recover from Brexit, it was hit by two further shocks: COVID-19 and the Ukraine war. In 2020, the UK's economy shrank by 11%, the worst single-year drop since the 18th century. The government borrowed nearly $300 billion just to stay afloat, pushing public debt to 105% of GDP. But there was no time to recover, because just 2 years later, the Russian-Ukraine war sent global energy markets into chaos. Europe, which was once heavily reliant on Russian oil supplies, scrambled for alternatives, which led to a nearly tenfold increase in UK electricity prices. Unit gas prices jumped by nearly tenfold, and electricity costs increased. And the resulting energy price, this drove inflation to over 11% by October 2022, the highest in over 40 years. To protect households, the government spent between 60 and 100 billion pounds. But this came at a cost. Debt servicing alone now costs the UK over 100 billion pounds per year, more than the entire defence budget. And crisis after crisis, with each one stacked on top of the last, the UK is failing to adapt, diversify its economy, and build resilience into its public systems. And soon, the internal foundations would begin to crack. Whilst external shocks destroyed the UK from the outside, A quieter, deeper decay was unfolding from within. Productivity, which is the lifeblood of any economy, has been stagnant for over a decade, averaging just 0.3% per year, which is behind every G7 nation apart from Italy. Now, why does this even matter? Well, when productivity stalls, wages stall. And when wages stall, living standards become worse. This is the reason why everything feels so expensive right now. But to make matters even worse, the UK's workforce is shrinking, with over 11 million people are economically inactive, which is nearly 1 in 4 working adults. And out of those 11 million people, 3.5 million are over 50 and are out of work, many being pushed out due to long-term illness or early retirement. So it's not just a labour shortage. The UK is facing a structural collapse in the working population, and it's only accelerating. By 2050, 1 in 4 Brits will be over 65, which will put an unprecedented pressure on pensions, the NHS and social care. And at the same time, birth rates are falling. Immigration policy is in chaos, and the government has no serious plan to address this ticking demographic time bomb. And all while this is happening, the UK still clings onto the pound that was once a symbol of global strength, which is now becoming more volatile due to political instability and market distrust. After the Truss mini-budget crisis in 2022, the pound has dropped to the lowest point against the dollar in history. A developed nation can survive one crisis. It can survive 2. But when you combine a collapsing workforce, weak leadership, the decay becomes inevitable. The UK stands at the edge of a precipice, a final moment of reckoning that will define its future. On the one side, it can reform, with bold leadership and economic reinvention. But on the other side, the UK could collapse, with political inertia, a brain drain, leading to irreversible decline. Now, if we're being optimistic, rebirth and reform is still possible. The UK service sector still remains as a global leader. New trade agreements with nations like Australia and Singapore could open up new frontiers. Regional hubs like Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds have the potential to become innovation engines, if given enough investment. The UK could enact economic rebalancing policies, like levelling up, to redistribute growth from London to stimulate growth in underperforming and neglecting regions like the North East, West Midlands, South Yorkshire, and parts of coastal Wales, areas long left behind by London's financial dominance. The government could also make a multi-billion-pound investment into infrastructure and skills. The Office for Budget Responsibility estimates that GDP could rise by 1.5% in over 5 years. Advancements in green energy, AI, biotech, which are still emerging sectors where the UK has talent and credibility. If we act now, we could seize the next wave of global reinvention. But for these changes to happen, it would take radical change and bold leadership, something which the UK has been lacking over the past 15 years. And as the trends have been showing, it's becoming more and more clear that the UK flirts with collapse, with more signs pointing to inertia. The political class is risk-averse, the electorate is divided, and public trust in institutions is at an all-time low. And the best minds in the UK, the ones who could drive rebirth and renaissance, are all leaving, causing a massive brain drain. In 2024, over 400,000 UK residents left the country, the highest number since Brexit, with growing numbers relocating to the global south, leveraging currency arbitrage to live in countries where the currency is weaker but the pound is stronger. Meanwhile, the UK's rich are moving to places like Dubai and Monaco, where they can legally reduce their taxes and retain more business profits, causing a massive wealth drain. And with the smartest and wealthiest individuals leaving, what will be left behind is a hollowed out middle class, an underfunded public sector, and a struggling working population burdened by the rising taxes and stagnant wages. Meanwhile, economists predict that countries like Poland will overtake the UK in GDP per capita by 2030. And if this happens, UK faces a dystopian future. So the real question isn't if UK is in decline, it's what the government is going to do about it. Will the UK bounce back and reform itself as the globally prosperous nation as it once was? Or will we watch the UK regress and decline into a third world economy?